Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, February 7th, 2023 edition of the SANS and Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich and today I'm recording from Jacksonville, Florida. Of course, you probably have heard already about the tragic earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria last night. With tragic events like this, we often have scams emerging. So published a couple tips how to evade some of these scams. Probably something that you want to share with friends. Don't think a lot of listeners necessarily to this podcast will be too susceptible to it, but it's something that keeps coming up, and if you see anything, please let us know. In recent years, some of these scams have become less visible, a little bit more difficult to track, as a lot of them are targeting individuals and groups on social media. In particular, for example, if you have links to the region affected by the disaster, you may, for example, see on related Facebook groups or such some of these scams popping up. That, of course, makes them harder to track down because they reach sort of a more targeted audience. So let us know if you see something. And of course, with earthquakes, there are always these sort of unpredictable surprise results. So there is often a certain lag in some of these scams showing up. And in a second post today, I wrote about a little trick that you may find helpful to track systems that are infected, in particular sort of IoT devices and the like. One of the things that I see many of these bots do if they infect a device is they try to look up what is the public IP address of the device. And in order to do so, they're typically connecting to one of a small number of APIs that return the public IP address. So you can look for DNS lookups for these host names or for HTTP requests if you have the visibility for these APIs in order to detect possibly infected systems. Just be careful, like with many things, you will have false positives here. There are a lot of IoT devices that will use these APIs or similar APIs as part of their normal operation. So this is one of those things where you run it in a detection mode only. You're not outright blocking these URLs. And as a little side note here, I'll also put this in the diary post. There is a URL that you may see being hit ever so often, wanipcn.xml. Well, that just happens to be a URL that's part of a vulnerability in the Realtek SDK. It's an older vulnerability, so nothing really to be too excited about. Just happens to have some of this WAN IP part as part of the file name, but not related to looking up the IP address. It just sort of opens up connectivity to an external IP address. And yesterday I mentioned an OpenSSH update and mentioned also that, well, there wasn't really a lot of detail known about the particular vulnerabilities being addressed here. We now have a little bit more detail about CVE 2023-25136. This one affects OpenSSH version 9.1 and has been in the code since last July. It is problematic because it is pre-authentication and it could theoretically lead to remote code execution. It's a double free vulnerability, so something that's exploitable, but as Qualys points out, due to some kernel mitigation, other exploit mitigations, exploitation will likely be tricky. Also, the exploitation happens while OpenSSH still runs in the less privileged mode, so you don't get sort of full root access to the system. Still something that you should patch, and certainly don't delay the patch. Who knows when an exploit will be available. Exploitability also likely depends on the exact Linux distribution and such that you're using. And the long list of devices you never should expose to the internet, well, certainly includes a Redis server. The NoSQL memory-resistant database, sadly, is still often exposed to the internet and then not adequately secured via passwords or other access controls. We have seen attackers take advantage of this in the past. Aqua Security has now demonstrated or documented an interesting new wave of attacks. What the attacker is doing here is that once they connect to the Redis server, they'll actually try to load a module in the Redis server. Like many NoSQL databases, functionality is somewhat limited in these databases. So what the attacker does here is essentially load a bot into the database that adds additional commands that can then be used to further compromise the system. One of the main payloads here appears to be also crypto coin mining, and they state here that the Monero wallet that has been receiving some of the benefits here apparently accumulated something like $4,500 US. Not really a ton, but then again, these days with crypto coins, in particular Monero, the value of the coins is quite low. But then again, if you don't pay for the computing power, well, it's still money. Well, that's it for today. So thanks for listening and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.